Good morning, class. Happy Tuesday. So yesterday, we learned that sometimes historical nonfiction texts can feel really hard, but that's okay. We can use some super extreme strategies to help us understand these texts. We talked about a three-part strategy. There's some hard work we do before, some hard work we do during, and some hard work after. So we're going to use that same strategy. We're going to continue to practice it today with chapter 11. Before we read, we'll have to preview the text. Then, as we read, we'll stop after each chunk and retell in our own words. Finally, when we're all done, we'll think about how each of those chunks of information fit together to build an even bigger understanding of the chapter. All right, let's do this. All right, so follow along with me in chapter 11, the colonies resist. It should be attached at the bottom of your assignment. So, as I'm previewing the text, I'm looking for text features. I see the heading, the colonies resist. I know that to resist means to fight against, to fight back. So right now I'm thinking there's going to be some problems in this chapter. Let's read the bold heading, help from other colonies. Oh, I'm remembering that there are 13 colonies. So this heading makes me predict that all the colonies are probably going to work together. I hope so. Now, let's look at the big question. How did colonists' attitudes and view of themselves begin to change? If it's a big question, big and bold, I'm thinking it's really important, and that answer will probably be part of the main idea. Let's go to page 2 and continue to preview this text. Wow, I see a big picture taking up a whole page. The caption says, throughout the colonies, there was a determination to help the people of Boston. This part sounds like it connects to my earlier idea, my prediction that the colonies are going to come together and work together. I'm already connecting some pieces. Let's go to page number 3. All right, I see a new heading. The First Continental Congress. I know that Congress has something to do with the government. Even if I'm not totally sure what, I know it's related. And so now I'm wondering if the colonists are going to come together in some kind of organized way, kind of like our government. Maybe they'll make their own government. I also see a text box that says vocabulary. I see 2 words. The first word is Supreme Court. A Supreme Court is the highest court in all the land, the most supreme. What that means, it's like the superhero of all the courts. So when laws are being talked about in a court, when there's judges and lawyers, it goes through all these steps. And then when it gets to the top, it's at the Supreme Court. These are the big decisions are made here. The really, really big decisions. I also see the word declaration, a formal statement. This makes me think maybe some kind of big statement's going to be made in a Supreme Court. I'm not sure. We'll have to read on to figure that out. Let's go preview page 4. I see 2 pictures. The caption says, George Washington, left, and Thomas Jefferson, right, attended the First Continental Congress. Ooh, this made my brain jump right to my boxes and bullets and remembering who. I should jot in George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Right away, I have 2 bullets. So, if they each get a whole picture to themselves, I'm thinking they must be pretty important. And I'm not really sure why, but if they're both at the First Continental Congress, this must be a big deal. This must be a big event. Something big is happening. I'm not sure what yet. Let's see. A new identity, my next heading. So, sometimes people say this word identity. So someone's identity is who they are. For example, I identify as a female teacher from New York City. You probably identify differently. Everyone has their own identity. So one thing though, we can have some things in common. You might also identify as a New Yorker. So this says this little part here, a new identity. I'm wondering, who's going to kind of rediscover themselves? Are these the colonists? What kind of new identity? Maybe, something's really going to change. I also see 2 more vocabulary words. The first word is defiant. Someone who is defiant breaks the rules on purpose. I hope you're never defiant. The second word is resolution. A resolution is a final decision that is usually meant to solve a problem. We sometimes even use this fancy word. You guys have probably seen it in our story mounted. Sometimes that ending we call a resolution. I wonder what the resolution is going to be of this problem. Let's read on. Go to page 5. Ooh, I see a map with the caption, "The colonists began to think of themselves as Americans, not as members of the 13 separate colonies." Wow, I haven't even read the text yet, and I have so many ideas coming together. So, the colonists are having this new identity. Instead of a New Yorker, now I'm an American. See how that's so different? I'm not different than you. We're all one. We're all Americans. You're from this colony, I'm from this colony. You know what? We're all Americans. We should come together and work together. Wow, I'm wondering what they're going to come together and figure out. Let's go to that last page. All right, no more headings, no more text features. Cool, I think I have prepared myself to read this chapter. Let's get started. So we're going to head right back up to the top. Chapter 11, The Colonies Resist. Time to get started with part 2. Help from other colonies. Parliament was right about one thing. The Intolerable Acts made the people of Boston and the rest of Massachusetts suffer. However, Parliament didn't expect the other countries to come to their aid. Remember, Parliament, that's the British government with the king. Pennsylvania sent barrels of flour to the people of Massachusetts. New York sent sheep. South Carolina sent sacks of rice. Connecticut sent money. Virginia sent corn and wheat. Virginia's leaders even went a step further. They set aside a day of fasting and prayer for the people of Boston. They also declared that the Intolerable Acts were a threat to liberty in every colony. If the king and Parliament could do those things in Massachusetts, what would stop them from doing the same in other colonies? Now pause, think about that chunk. So British Parliament, it feels like they thought they could just go in, make these horrible, intolerable laws in Boston with no consequences? No way. Consequences are always there for actions. So it looks like the colonists are going to try to prove the British Parliament wrong. The colonists, instead of saying, okay, fine, they're going to come together even stronger and try to fight back against this British Parliament who's making these unfair laws. Let's see. Okay, now we have this picture. Determined to help the people of Boston. We know a little bit more about that now. The Virginians took a bold step. They called for delegates from all over the colonies to meet and discuss what to do next. This would be the second time delegates met to resist an act of Parliament. The first time, the Stamp Act Congress had been successful. This time, though, the British government seemed determined not to back down. Okay, so let's pause, think about that chunk. So Virginia, they're trying to do even more to help Boston. They asked people from each colony to meet and talk about what they should do. These people, they're called delegates. So let's think about what that means in our lives. Let's pretend that Miss Ng wanted to plan a meeting with the whole school. So instead of having a conversation with all 500 or whatever people in the school, which would be craziness, she would just ask the teachers to come and talk to her. So as teachers, we would speak for our class. Miss Hattinger and I, we would represent class 303 at the meeting. We would be the delegates chosen to represent your class. So just the same way, each colony chose a few people to represent them. They sent those people off. They said, this is what we want to get done. Go tell them. Me and Miss Hattinger, we would go do the same for you. We would be your delegates. All right, let's read on. First Continental Congress. In September 1774, 56 colonial leaders met in Philadelphia. They represented 12 of the 13 British colonies in North America. Only Georgia did not send delegates. I'm going to pause here quickly. So each colony sent 56 people instead of sending every single citizen, right? Instead of sending the whole school, you just send me, Miss Hattinger. But then it says Georgia didn't send any delegates. That's odd to me. That's like if Miss Lynn didn't come to the meeting, then her class wouldn't be represented. I'm wondering why. Let's read on, maybe we'll find out. The colonists thought this meeting was important. We can tell by the delegates they chose. George Washington, Patrick Henry, and Thomas Jefferson represented Virginia. Sam Adams and his cousin represented Massachusetts. New York sent John Jay. Jay later served on the United States. John Adams wrote in his diary, There is in the Congress a collection of the greatest men upon his continent. This meeting became known as the First Continental Congress. I'm going to reread that. There is in the Congress a collection of the greatest men upon this continent. This meeting became known as the First Continental Congress. The delegates discussed their problems. They shared their anger at the British government. They issued a Declaration of Rights. The Declaration said that, as British colonists, they were entitled to all the rights of Englishmen. They listed the ways Parliament had taken away these rights since the French and Indian War. They also told King George III that the colonists were still loyal to him. They asked him to consider their complaints. Interesting. So they're still loyal to him. They're not totally fighting the king. They just want to be, respected. So they said to the king, look, we'll respect you, but you got to work with us. You got to give us some freedoms too. Okay, now I'm seeing my pictures. I got my 2 captions again. Now I know we're at the First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress did 2 more things. It voted to stop all trade with the British Parliament until the British Parliament repealed the Intolerable Acts. To repeal is to take away, so to end the Intolerable Acts. Until Parliament removed the laws, colonists would buy nothing from Britain and sell nothing to Britain. The Congress also agreed to meet again in May 1775 if Parliament had not given back their rights. Okay, I'm going to pause there. So, 3 things were kind of talked about at this big Continental Congress, this big meeting where all those delegates were to represent their colonies. The first thing, they created a Declaration of Rights and gave it to the king. So in these rights, they said, look, we respect you, you're still our king, but you need to respect us too. The second thing that happened is they demanded that the Intolerable Acts be stopped. They said, we will not respect you, we will not work with you if you keep these Intolerable Acts in place. The third thing, they agreed that, look, we'll give it a year, right? We'll give it a year, and if nothing gets better, we'll meet again in 1 year. So those are the 3 things that happened at this Continental Congress, the first one. All right, a new identity. The First Continental Congress and the Declaration of Rights were the most defiant acts the colonies had ever taken. But something more than defiance had happened. This something had no exact name. There is no exact date when it started. Still, it was as important as any of the resolutions passed by the First Continental Congress. Maybe it started with those shipments of flour and rice and money to Boston from the colonies. Maybe it began with the Stamp Act Congress. Maybe it had been happening all along, before anyone was aware of it. That something was that the colonies were coming together as never before. Before this, each colony had thought of itself as separate from the others. The colonists thought of themselves as Virginians or New Yorkers or Georgians. When they thought of an attachment to any other place, it was to Great Britain. That was particularly because each colony had more to do with Great Britain than it did with the other colonies. It was also due to the fact that colonists thought of themselves as British citizens with all the, quote, rights of Englishmen. I'm going to pause. So it seems like my prediction from the beginning was totally right. The colonists are coming together and forming a big team. They're working together to fight for their rights. These colonists are starting to think of themselves as kind of separate. Now they're Americans. They're not British. Well, they're still British, but they're starting to think, we don't really have to stay with them. We can be our own group of Americans, and we can demand for our rights. Let's read on. By the end of the First Continental Congress, many colonists were thinking of themselves as part of one country, not as people living in 13 different ones. They were more aware of the things they had in common. They were more aware that they needed each other. Patrick Henry summed up the new awareness perfectly. He told the First Continental Congress, quote, "The distinctions, or differences, between Virginians, Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers, and New Englands are no more. I am not a Virginian, but an American." That's a really important line. So no longer am I separate. We are all in this together. Okay, time for part 3. Time to piece all of that together. Wow, okay. That was a lot of information. Even I made some mistakes. I was reading so quickly. You heard me stumble over some words. Totally normal. And you saw how I went back and reread when I made a mistake. So I hope you do the same when you read. Let's think about all of this information. Let's summarize this. So first, the colonists are coming together to help the people in Boston after the Boston Tea Party. Very kind. Then the colonists decide, let's have a big meeting. They invite people from each of the colonies. These people are called delegates. The delegates represent their colony, just like how me and Miss Hattinger would represent you. At the big meeting, the colonists do 3 things. They create a Declaration of Rights, they demand that the intolerable acts stop, and they agree to meet in a year if nothing gets better. Then, finally, the chapter ends by colonists realizing they are no longer just from their colony. The colonists are one big team, and they are from America. Whew, that was a lot of work. So, we just learned a lot, and I think so many crazy things are going to start happening because when people come together to fight, think about one person or all these different people coming together, who's going to be stronger? Of course, the big team, right? So when you go back, you're going to go off and reread this chapter, and I want you to fill in your usual boxes and bullets for who, what, when, and where. You know how to go through, jot down. There's also going to be a question for you to answer in at least 3 sentences, like you've been doing every day. Keep up the awesome work. This is not easy. Have a good day.